Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar. We will just wait 30 seconds or so that all attendees can join the webinar, and then we will start shortly. Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Future-Proof Your BI and Analytics Platform. Today we're going to cover how you can explore and structure your data to take advantage and get more value out of the data that you have within your organization. But before we start, let me introduce myself and my colleague Jacob from TimeXtender. But before we do that, I want to make sure that all the participants and attendees can hear. Okay, so can you all raise your hand if you can hear me? I see two or four attendees at least managed to find that button next to themselves. So now I think everybody could hear us okay. And also during this webinar, feel free to put in questions in the question pane that you have, and we will either answer the questions right away, or if not, we will answer them after the presentation is done. So my name is Fredrik Ino at Infozone. I'm Global BI responsible at Infozone, and I will be co-presenting this webinar with Jacob Ross Anderson from TimeXtender, the company that developed Discovery Hub. Jacob is a solution specialist at TimeXtender and will be doing the product demo. The agenda for today's presentation is we will start with a short introduction, which we already covered. Then we'll cover the reality of today's world, where we'll look a little bit at the trends that organizations have today and what's coming. Then I will cover a little bit what Discovery Hub is and what use cases that it addresses. After that, I will hand over to Jacob, who will cover the product demo. And after the demo, we'll do a summary and wrap up and also have a Q&A. The webinar, the presentation part of the webinar will be for 30 minutes, and after that we will open up for Q&A. So what is the reality of today and the trends? Yeah, according to BARC, the top five trends within the BI market today is about master data and data quality management. People get more data and need to, in order to use it, they make sure that they have good quality of the data and that it's structured. You also have data discovery and visualization. People want to discover information about the data. They want to visualize it, see what's happening going on. And from the business side, there's a need or the demand more for self-service BI. The users want to do more themselves. They want to be able to analyze data, turn it around, visualize it, and also not have to wait a lot of time for long IT projects. Then from the IT side, you have the data governance. You need to know who are the people that are accessing data, how can they access, etc., so that you don't have like a Wild West out there and anybody have access to sensitive data, etc. And in that area, you also have demands from regulations, for example, GDPR from the European Union, and also preparing data for the business users so that they can do self-service. And luckily enough, these trends are in part or full addressed by Discovery Hub together with Click or other BI tools that are available. So that's one aspect of things. The other aspect of today's reality is the explosion of data. Organizations and companies get more and more data every day. 90% of the data in the world today has been created in the last 24 months, which means that there's an almost overflow of data coming from everything from website into databases, etc. And organizations today want to take advantage and use this data to their advantage and driving their business, making better decisions, etc. But that also means that you have to find a way how you can structure the process of bringing in new data and utilize it quickly and making sure that it's done in a way so that you can meet all the needs that we just covered in terms of self-service, governance, preparing data for the business users, etc. So these needs and today's reality fits great into what Discovery Hub addresses. And I usually say that I think what ClickView was to the BI world back in the year 2000 is what Discovery Hub is to the data warehouse today. You solve similar problems that you have had in the past, but using a new technology that is much more user-friendly, that is much more flexible than it was before. So people are building data warehouse, I think, for the last 20 or 30 years, but it's been very man-hour intensive and also very much scripting based, while a Discovery Hub is much more flexible, user-friendly, and more of a drag and drop built product, as you will see in the demo later on. So put it otherwise, Discovery Hub is a platform that uses data warehouse automation technology to gain efficiency, improve efficiency in the data warehousing process. So basically moving the data from the raw data to the data warehouse and into the BI tool, it's done faster and more efficient than traditional data warehouse solution. And by doing so, it also then reduces the development cost and operating cost in creating and maintaining your data warehouse environment. And the Discovery Hub basically consists of three different parts. The first part is the operational data exchange, which is like the raw data and the security. Which data will I bring in? As you see here on this schema, you can actually bring in data from many different data sources, like your different ERP systems, your SAP, your CRM, your cloud, your web data, etc. Then you select which is the data that I want to bring into my operational data exchange. Then when you have it there, then you can then start doing the consolidation or the transform part of this. How do I want to create my data model? How can I cleanse some of the bad data out? How can I consolidate the data? And you then basically turn your different data sources into one coherent data model. Then the third part of the product is the semantic layer, where you may create your more specific data mart. You have the data version handling and the documentation. And through this flow, you also have the data lineage, which I think is from a GDPR perspective, but also from a general maintenance perspective, extremely important functionality that Discovery Hub comes, which basically tells you if you have a field up on the semantic layer, you can see where does this come from, how it is calculated, etc., all the way back to the source data, which gives you tremendous benefits when you want to see how any changes in these fields will affect other things, etc., and where it's coming from. And I think also the automatic documentation that you will have. So basically everything you do within the Discovery Hub will be automatically documented, which I think from people like myself that are used to work with ClickView and ClickSense, you usually don't spend too much time documenting everything you have done in the script, etc., which sometimes when you look back at it, it may be hard to follow what have happened. So then, what are the use cases that more specifically that Discovery Hub are addressing? And 5 use cases are we going to cover today here. One is the compliance with industry regulations, and a typical example of that is the GDPR from the European Union. It's a shared semantic layer. Basically, you may have different BI tools within an organization, and you want these BI tools to be able to use the same data with the same definitions, regardless if it's Qlik, Tableau, or Power BI. We have the data quality. We have the creation of a new data warehouse, or modernize or upgrade an existing data warehouse. So we're going to look at these 5 use cases a little bit more in detail before I hand over to Jacob and the product demo. So regulations and compliance. In the GDPR world now, you need to take much more responsibility for the data that you're using. Where is it coming from? Where and how do you store personal data? How are you going to remove that data if somebody asks you for it, etc.? And all of this is basically addressed with TimeXtender and the Discovery Hub by the agile data modeling. As I said, you have the automated documentation, and you also have the data lineage that clearly tells you, oh, the field from this source data is then connected to this field in the front end that the user uses, and this is the way how it gotten there, so that you can track and follow your data flow through the ETL process in the data warehouse. The next use cases is this of the shared semantic layer, where you have your many descriptive data sources, but you also now may have several different end user tools like Qlik, Tableau, Excel, etc. And you want to avoid having them go directly to the source data, because then all of them may use different definitions of your KPI or metrics, and they may not use the same cleansing rules, etc. So here you can have one flow through the data warehouse up to the modern data warehouse layer, and then have these end user tools addressing either the semantic layer or the modern data warehouse layer with the same definitions for regardless of the tool that's used, which of course will drive consistency. Everybody uses one version of the truth, etc. Then we have the data quality, which I think, from my experience of seeing many customer projects, is something that pretty much all organizations are struggling with. Of course, to maybe some different degree, but I think most companies have some issues with the data quality, and how are they going to improve the data quality within their organization, etc. And I think here you can set up rules within the Discovery Hub that let you fetch bad data, or set up rules that you can validate data from different data sources, etc., to make sure that you then identify data that doesn't meet the standard, and then can address these kind of things. And again, making sure that regardless who's using the end data, you know what data you're looking at. Sorry. And of course, maybe the classical case is creation of a new data warehouse from scratch, where you basically build up a new data warehouse directly within Discovery Hub. But instead of doing that manually, hiring consultant that will spend days writing SQL script, moving that through the different stages of a data warehouse, you then can deploy Discovery Hub, and by easy dragging and dropping, as Jacob will show in a minute here, moving the data through the ETL process and making sure it's ready for the front end to consume the data. And if you already have an existing data warehouse, you can, of course, modify that and make it more efficient. One other thing I really like about the Discovery Hub is, I think sometimes when you use BI tools to read directly from different data sources, is that it's hard to monitoring the sequence of things should be loaded and how many things can you load in parallel, etc. But since this is now done through one tool and all the jobs and schedules are sort of hanging together, Discovery Hub figures out itself which things it can load in parallel and which order they can load things, and that will compress the load time significantly. And it also has a lot of functionality for doing incremental loads, which will speed up the load time, which also means that you can increase the sort of real time of your data or get it more close to real time by using a tool like Discovery Hub. So that was a quick run through of the 5 examples of use cases where you can use Discovery Hub. And with that, I will now turn over to Jacob, who's going to demo how this is done in real life, sort of. So over to you, Jacob.
Thank you, Frederick. I hope everybody can hear me, and thank you all for participating. So I hope you're seeing my screen right now and you're able to see the physical representation of Discovery Hub. So we only have roughly 15 minutes, and then of course we have time for questions afterwards. But I have pre-built a small solution here so that we have some opportunity to see some features. And I've roughly spent 15 minutes building this, but if you are interested in seeing how you build something from scratch, I recommend going to our YouTube channel, or, well, best case is obviously ask Infozone for a dedicated demo. So Discovery Hub has been around for roughly 15 years. And so when it comes to capacity of this tool and capability, if you think back 15 years, it was very heavy in modeling, especially because we didn't have as many resources for computing power. And the point I'm trying to make is this is a quite extensive piece of software. And I'm only going to be able to show you a few handful of features that was mentioned here. Just to explain roughly what I've built, I have here a single data source. This is White World Importers that I have moved into an operational data exchange. And what I've done here is I've kept the data raw. And my operational data exchange is basically where we're going to set up the initial layer so we can lock out users for the source system, so there will be no unauthorized queries to those. Instead, you repoint all your existing click apps or web apps or data scientist that needs the data raw or forecasting modeling. You can all do this from the ODX. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruits being achieved here, but of course the main value and the majority of the BI and reporting will come out of the modern data warehouse. So this is where we have our more business-friendly model. This is where we have agreed on the naming conventions. You've applied all the business logic and transformations, which I've actually personally, I like having a separate data warehouse where I do all the staging, etc. So I keep that separate from a clean presentation layer, but this is a personal preference. Then on top of that, we have our semantic layer. And here I have built a small model based on the data that I have in the data warehouse. And this is where I select specifically the tables and fields that I want. And I use the relationships that I have defined over in the data warehouse. So pretty much we have an end-to-end solution from the point of connecting to my data sources and then all the way into creating a, in this case, a ClickSense app. Or it could have been a ClickSense QVD files for each of these tables here. So just to give an example, so here I'm looking at a dashboard that came from that set model. And so let's say we build out this solution and we now have end-to-end, and someone then asks you, where's order amount coming from? So I'm using this as an example to demonstrate our data lineage as mentioned. So basically, this software will always maintain the integrity of the data lineage. So always make sure that if you update naming conventions or if you apply logic, etc., it's always going to make sure that all dependent scripts are being updated automatically. So from here, I can simply click data lineage, and with a single click, I'm able to visualize where order amount is coming from, including any calculations. And you can see here I wrote it as unit price, but in fact it's using unit price USD. So someone has changed the name since I built this all the way down to your data source. And I can use this as a navigation window, so I can also double click here and it'll automatically take me to the source, from which I can then go the opposite way and show you impact analysis, which basically just takes you from quantity and then shows you all the aspects that it's used in here. So in the context of GDPR, one of the 4 questions you need to be able to answer is where is data coming from, where is it going, who has access to it, and for what purpose. And so imagine quantity being a social security number. Basically, a data protection officer would be able to say, all right, this is where it comes in, these are what's happening to it, and these are the front ends that we're pushing them into. And then you would only need to audit the front end. And essentially, you have answered almost every question. So from a security perspective, we can handle security in each of these layers. But what's important to note is that you can have people using the operational data exchange exclusively or combine something from the ODX with a modern data warehouse. And we also have plenty of customers that doesn't even use the semantic layer because Qlik has, or Power BI or Tableau, has a lot of capabilities in the front end, so you wouldn't even need to have that semantic layer. It's just an option for if you want to have that full documentation. The same thing with security. You can set them at each of these layers. So for instance, here is an example. I have a couple of database roles. I have one for readers and developers. Here I'd be able to go in and, for instance, show you how I could say, all right, the readers has access to everything except order amount. So for some reason, I don't want them to see this. And so everything I built is fully documented, including my security settings. So when I push out these documentation, it will basically create a documentation based on every object we have in the project, and it's based on the need for compliance. So this is not the type of documentation for end users. We have other options for that. This is more the kind of documentation in relation to a HIPAA for the US side, SUB-NOX. We have Basel II here in Europe, and certainly GDPR is coming. And so a 15-minute project here already generated 318 pages of documentation. So it's quite extensive documentation. Just to show you some examples here. Shows you every fields, everything is hyperlinked, what are the relationships to other tables, what indexes, what data types, what copies, what transformations. And if we go down to order lines, we can see here that here specifically it says the security role access that the TX readers are partially denied. So even when we set security settings, these will also be part of our documentation. And if we get down to our order amount, we can now see here that it specifically states that this group is denied access on this. So you can imagine how much easier it's going to be to document. And if you use our semantic layer, we even have our Qlik app documented here as well, alongside all the relationships and possibly transformations in Qlik script or whatever else we have added to the model. So this is one of the big deals in that we makes it very easy to connect to multiple various data sources, pull them into a future-proof platform where we're going to make the assumption that things will change tomorrow. It's going to be easy to adjust, add new data sources, take data sources out, and we're also making it easier if you want to use multiple front ends like Qlik and Power BI or Qlik and Excel, which is a very common example. So just to give you a brief example, let's say we have here some orders, and now we also want to include per invoices. Then just by dragging and dropping, I'm able to add additional tables in here. And as I drag and drop, it auto-generates all the code, all the script that I need to do to use here, and I can, if I want to create a new field, it's very easy for me to enrich the data model with the transformations and cleansing and validation steps or whatever I may need to do, which is more of a classic data warehouse tasks. But doing all of this inside here allows me that whatever front end I'm using, I'm able to create one version of the truth and ensure that doesn't matter whether it is Click or it's Excel, we know that people are using the same numbers. And like I said, the data lineage will be maintained. So if someone changed the names of something we have used in a calculation, like the same example, I'm going to say US dollars, then even though I wrote it as unit price, the engine will automatically translate it into unit price USD. So these are some of the level of automations that we include in this product to make sure that it's not just the first version that's going to be working out easily. It's also going to be in the future when you're going to make changes. So here I'm going to drag and drop them up here. And while this is automated and while there's a lot of things we do underneath the hood, I want you to ensure that you always know that you can go down and review what's going on. So this is not a black box. If you do need to see what's going on, you have access to the full script and you're allowed to, or able to, of course you're allowed, but you're able to edit and customize these or attach additional SSIS packages or whatever else you need. So from a limitation perspective, largely the only limitations are given by SQL Server. That's the underlying engine to this tool, which also means that if we wanted to work on premise, this is what we're looking at. If I wanted to work in the cloud, the only difference is that I would just have to put in a cloud server here, so an Azure database, and it would work as seamlessly in the cloud as well. So you can imagine, even if you're not ready for the cloud today, how much easier it is that the platform you're building it on is ready for the cloud as well. Just to finish this up, I'm just going to quickly create some relationships. And the reason why I'm doing this is to instruct the engine that these are how things are related. And I can reuse this relationship across all my semantic models. And I can also in my OLAP cubes if I'm building those. So inside here, I can go through and I can create a new semantic model that I want to call invoices. And I'm just going to connect to my data warehouse, or it could have been the ODX, but in this case, I'm going to use this. And I'm going to drag in the tables that I want. And because I've created these relationships, it will give me that as an option, so I don't have to manually decide those. And it will automatically create unique keys, so I don't have to create those manually. And that way, we've already created a fully documented table. And now I can go ahead and deploy and execute all of this, and it will automatically figure out what has changed, what is new. It's going to execute the whole project regardless of what has changed and new, just to show you. And one of the values of this engine and one of the most valuable features is that I don't have to worry about order. The engine automatically figure out what tables and what objects and what logic needs to run in a certain order. So when I tomorrow need to add new data sources or new logic, it will automatically figure out the most efficient way of running these things. And it's also able to run in multiple threads. So in this example, I'm using my local laptop. So we have five threads here. You'll notice here how you only see a thread 2. You don't see the 1. So this is an indicator that the thread 1 is occupied with a very big table. But while that one big table is running, everything else that isn't dependent on that one table continues. So you can just imagine how much efficient it will be, because as a human, we typically have to sacrifice performance for readability. But here the engine doesn't care whether you're ODX, data staging area, modern data warehouse, OLAP cube, tabular model, click app, whatever you are, it will figure out where do you belong in the value chain independently of everything else and execute and run you in the correct order. So this alone is for a lot of companies a positive return on investment. But just to take it one step further, we are actually going to push this into Click. I forgot to do that before, so we're going to call this one invoices, and we're going to use Click Sense Desktop. And then from here, I'm basically going to deploy and and send that into ClickSense Desktop. And this will be the end of this demo once we have this open. But I hope this made sense, and I hope you were able to follow me. Otherwise, you will be sent this in a video so you can watch it in slow motion and maybe get a better feeling of how I was able to get from connecting to my ODX, and then suddenly now I'm having an app available in ClickSense. So if we take a look inside here, we can see it's currently loading in the data, and we can see if we can open it up, and I'm able to now start building the app, and I can go ahead and push in some data. So anyway, I see we have a couple of questions. So the final things I wanted to mention is also, of course, we do incremental loading. So that's a question. Yes, we also do slowly changing dimensions, and we also do type 1, type 2, type 0, type 3, and 2 other hybrid versions if you read Kimball books. So excellent questions, and you can see videos on our homepage or on our YouTube channel for those features. So let's see here if this is me or you, Frederick, that needs to answer these questions. So we have one here. So here we have a questions about whether you can store a single source of the truth for expressions or set analysis, and whether we can create variables in this tool. So this seems very click focused, and yes, you can to some extent do that, but in master items currently is outside the scope of the semantic layer. We focus on building the loading script or the QVD, and then we would expect you then from there to do the rest inside ClickSense or ClickView. The idea of setting set expressions and master items are definitely on the roadmap, but to that extent, we don't really feel like we're not really enriching anything to Click, because this is one of the aspects they do really well. But we're making sure that the data foundation underneath the front-end tool is fully set, and all the ingredients in which would go into the app has been fully documented as well. So another question here is regarding Power BI, whether you have to create an OLAP cube. So you have a couple of options if you want to use Power BI. You can create an OLAP cube. This Click app here, if I wanted this to be in a tabular model for Power BI, I can actually create multiple endpoints and use the same model in multiple front-end tools. And this is probably the most popular, to create a tabular model and push that into Power BI. But as I said earlier, I expect that the majority of the BI is going to go against the modern data warehouse, especially from a self-service perspective. This is the gold standard. This is where you enrich the data. You have access to the majority of it, and you might be able to address any further issues dipping into the ODX. But again, I would expect that the majority of Click apps and Power BI and Tableau and any other front end would go against the modern data warehouse. That's the most popular option. The semantic layer is just a added benefit, and it's really only when you have a need for a full level of governance for the full value chain. Any other questions? Otherwise, Frederick, do you have something to add before we open up?
Yes, Jacob, this is Fredrik. I have a couple of slides just to wrap things up before we open up for Q&A. Thank you very much for that demo, Jacob, and also for answering the questions that we had. And I think I agree with you. I think the sort of discovery hub ends where you have prepared and created the load script and the data for the front-end tools. You don't sort of create graphs or master items or that kind of things in the Discovery Hub. That is for the end user tools themselves to do, regardless if it's Tableau, Power BI, or ClickSense or ClickView. What I wanted to cover just before we wrap up and start the question is, if you are interested in knowing more about Discovery Hub and how this can benefit your organization, we have developed a very simplistic and transparent purchasing process or buying process. You're welcome to contact us, and we can set up a general product demo that lasts for an hour, where Jacob or somebody at Infozone can show you much more how the tool works and the features and functions, and how it can address the specific needs that you have. And usually 1 hour is roughly enough. And after that, if you're interested and want to know more, then if you provide us with some data, we can also do a specific demo with your own data, so you get a sense for how this tool could work with your own data. And doing that, or we can set up like a discovery workshop where we look at what you're having today, what do you want to do, and sort of having a workshop where you can then put together a plan for how you could move forward. And then you can do a pilot project in the cloud, so you don't have to invest in a lot of hardware and machines, etc., in order to see how this could actually work. And I think last but not least, Discovery Hub is then sold as a subscription, so you can start subscribing to Discovery Hub for your organization, and basically then only commit for 30 days at a time, and then you can say, if you then don't want to continue, you could say, you know, I want to unsubscribe, and you don't have to make a huge upfront commitment and purchasing hundreds of licenses, etc., and that you're committed forever, but you basically buy this as a service or as a subscription model, which I think is very attractive. So it's quite transparent purchasing process without which reduces the risk and also reduces the upfront cost and engagement that you need to do in order to continue and start working with Discovery Hub. And with that, then I'm just going to quickly cover some of the use cases that you then can address with Discovery Hub. It could be compliance with industry regulations, like you mentioned, the Jacob HIPAA or GDPR. You can address the shared semantic layer, or that you have several BI or front-end tools within your organization. You want to make sure that they address the same data. You can address the data quality. You can also create a new data warehouse or upgrade or modernize your existing data warehouse to a more usable, automatically documented tool like Discovery Hub that will take your existing data warehouse to the next level. So with that, I'm going to open up and see if we have any more questions. I can't see any questions in the chat. Can you see any questions, Jacob?
No, I imagine we must have addressed everybody's concerns, and they are now looking for the numbers of their local sales rep to get in hold of Infozone.
Exactly.
Now, in general, I appreciate the questions that we got, and I want to thank you, Frederick, for presenting on our behalf with Discovery Hub, and I would invite everybody to take a closer look at Infozone, and especially their solutions with Discovery Hub and Click has proven very attractive to a lot of their customers. So I hope that you will give them a closer look.
Yes, and thank you very much, Jacob, for doing the product demo, and also thank you all attendees for attending today's seminar. And as we said in the beginning, you will also receive a recording of this webinar that you can look at again or share with one of your colleagues. And don't forget also that the Infozone, we're based both in Sweden and the US. So whether if you're based in the US or Sweden, we can assist you and address your needs. So thank you very much for participating.
Bye.